Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnan Jagatgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. So there was a slight delay because I am taking this class from Newcastle. We had two meetings yesterday. There was a spiritual retreat at Edinburgh, and today there was a program in the afternoon on the central message of Bhagavad Gita in one of the halls here in Newcastle. So there was a bit delay. The audio was not working properly. I hope all of you can hear now. Anyway, we will continue from where we left. The birth of Sri Ramakrishna was discussed, his horoscope and other things, and Shudiram was very happy because according to the horoscope, he would be a leader of, he would be a religious, not only a religious leader, but a large number of people would follow him. That was what the astrologers told him. His horoscope was read by those astrologers, and then they predicted these things. We discussed about that horoscope last time. Now, as the son grew up, when Gadadhar was growing up, Shudiram found that there were certain tendencies in him which exhibited extraordinary memory and talent. Of course, Shudiram was not aware initially that he would shun school learning, he would not go to school. But as he was trying to teach his son Mahabharata, Ramayana, and read out certain things to him, he found that he had an extraordinary memory and wonderful talents for drawing, for preparing images from clay, and many things. So the lively boy, of course, he was too small at that time. These things were discovered by Shudiram much later. But when he was very small, Shudiram would repeat the name as the tradition in Bengal goes. They are told, Swami Vivekananda also mentioned once, a race which is not proud of its ancestors will never become great. So some youth came to Swami Vivekananda when he was traveling in Rajasthan, and he was telling the children there, or maybe the students there, the youth there, about the greatness of the Rajput. Rajputs are very proud of their ancestry. It's a very heroic land. And he was asking these youth whether they knew about the great Rajputs, their own ancestors. They were Rajput kids, obviously. They belong to the Kshatriya community. And some of the youth who were influenced by modern education said, oh, what is the use of remembering all these historical things? They are things of the past. So Swami Vivekananda was very much upset. He said, what do you say? A race that is not proud of its ancestors can never become great. So it is very important for people to try to find out their ancestry and find out, especially an ancestry where they can identify some great people who belong to their community, or maybe to a particular caste or their ancestors. If that ancestry, if it shows that there were some people who had contributed a lot towards society in general, or maybe towards many things, they were creative enough to make some contribution to society, then one felt that even I stand a chance because my ancestors were great. I should also be able to emulate them. So that is what Swamiji believed in. So there is a tradition in Bengal that you go on telling the names of your father, your forefather, That is taught to the children when they, even before they go to school. So Kshudiram very often was seen, according to the biographer Swami Shardanand, repeating the names of his ancestors. In fact, one is supposed to remember the names of at least 7 ancestors. Nowadays, people don't even remember who their great grandfathers were. Maybe they remember the name of the grandfather, but beyond that, it is very rare to see, because that it's not a kind of ancestor worship, but it's just remembering our ancestors. So, in the tradition of Vedanta, whenever whenever Vedantic texts are studied, we recite a prayer: Yo Brahmanam Vidadhati Purvam Yo Vai Vedanscha Pranoti Tasmai Tamha Devam Atma Buddhi Prakasham Mumukshur Vai Sharanam Aham Prapadde. Now, here, not all ancestors are remembered, but it's a general prayer. I am a student of Vedanta, and it is because of my ancestors, the great ancestors who lived the principles of Vedanta. It began from those Brahmaganis who had known that Brahman and passed on that tradition to the succeeding generations. May not be their biological children. It goes from Guru to Shishya. So that relationship is known as, it is more, it's a more, you can say, eternal than the biological parents. So the ancestry does not have to be just biological ancestry. You have to remember your ancestors, you have to remember the lineage of gurus from whom the Vedic knowledge has come. That is the idea behind all these things. But in Brahmins especially, there was a tradition, because you first got your Gayatri mantra, Upanayana, that is how the tradition goes. You get it from your father. So it's not just the physical body that has been inherited by us, but it's the Gayatri mantra. That's why when you get Gayatri Upanayana, you are known as a Dvija. The second, you are born again. First birth is not so important. Of course, father gives us, mother gives us a biological body. But his duty is over when he imparts the Gayatri mantra. And that is why they remember the ancestors. It's not just because we are indebted, they have given us a biological body. That's not very significant. You could have been born in any place or with any parents, but more than that, the tradition where the father was supposed to be the guru, especially when you gave the Gayatri mantra. Of course, they say during the Vedic age, Gayatri was given to all castes, but somehow it became the monopoly of Brahmins. And somehow the custom was that non-Brahmins or even some so-called lower castes were denied Upanayana and this Gayatri mantra and all. They were prohibited. But that's a very sad chapter in our Hindu history. Every father or every ancestor we should be proud of, because he makes you a Dvija. When he gives the Gayatri, when you are of 8 years of age, normally that's the age when you get your Upanayana. These were all great customs. And when the Gayatri mantra was given, you remembered all your ancestors. Why? Because your father has got his initiation into Upanayana or the Gayatri mantra from his father. So that at least 7 generations, if you remember, a few generations at least, one has to remember, because that power of the mantra has come and they were devout people. The whole ancestors were supposed to do the Gayatri mantra regularly when the Vedic tradition was being followed. So they expected the succeeding generations to continue that tradition and hand over that spiritual power to the succeeding generation. That is why they remembered. It's not just because we belong to a particular family that we should remember our ancestors because they gave us biological birth. No, that's not the idea. So Kshudiram would not only repeat the names of his ancestors, but he would repeat them with a lot of reverence. That see, my father gave me the Gayatri mantra. If in future, I mean, when the child is small, he is not yet his thread ceremony or the Upanayana is not yet, is too small. He was just a baby. But in his years, he's hearing the great and the names of the ancestors who have handed over the spiritual heritage to their children. So that Dvija or the second birth, which is the spiritual birth, was actually the real handing over of that tradition. So Kshudiram would repeat the names of all the ancestors, and then along with that, he would also repeat short hymns and salutation mantras for different gods and goddesses. Because at that age, learning takes place through the oral tradition. Yesterday there was a program where we discussed the about yoga, mantras, and the mantra shastra. Why sound is very important. The first form of learning is through hearing. When the child is born, he may not be given knowledge of alphabets and all those things. That came much later. But the moment he is born, or some people say even before the child is born, and medical science has proved that the child in the womb hears these sounds. So the mother is expected to repeat those wonderful chants. So consciously or unconsciously, the child hears it, and the power of sound imparts the wisdom associated with those mantras and stotras. So whether the child understood or not, he was definitely not able to repeat these things. But still, the father, Kshudiram, would, because he was a scholar, he was a Pandit, he knew different hymns and of the various gods and goddesses, and also some nice verses, stories from Ramayana and Mahabharata, the Bengali version, of course. We have a Bengali Ramayana also. There are different versions of Ramayana in vernacular languages. Tulsi Ramayana is there in the Hindi belt. So also in Bengali Ramayana is also there. So very often you will find that the sound, the very sound of these mantras, the child was exposed to these sounds. Whether he understood it or not, the sounds left an indelible impression in his consciousness. And when he grew up, it was easy for him to remember all these stotras. So, but as he grew up, something extraordinary happened. Kshudiram found that even from a very young age, he had an exceptional memory. In Sanskrit, it is known as Shruti Dhara. Shruti means what is heard, the spoken word, the good hymns and the good things, of course. And Dhara means to hold. So it's not just hearing, but hearing and holding on to that sound and reproducing it whenever you want. That is a great talent which his father saw in Sri Ramakrishna. That is why when somebody asks Sri Ramakrishna, you have never read books. In his later life, some Pandits used to come and used to discuss and quote. Sometimes he used to tell the Mahabharata says, the Ramayana says this, the Upanishad say this, and he used to quote some of the verses, not necessarily in Sanskrit, but the gist of it. So people would be surprised, said, you never went to school, you never read anything. Then how do you quote so many things? How did you acquire this knowledge? So we should remember, Sri Ramakrishna told something very significant. He said, it is true that I did not read, but do you know how much I heard? You see, that is very important to understand that in the Indian tradition, formal literacy was not given importance. Even the bowls and all the people, the minstrels who lived on for a living, they used to go and sing songs. They had wonderful memory. They would hear from their ancestors that the tradition of conveying, the oral tradition of conveying these songs to successive generations, even if they never had an opportunity or they never felt the need to go to school. Because this oral tradition was very, very strong. Unfortunately, after the English system of education was imposed upon all these tolls upon the Indians, unfortunately, many of these tolls, in one of tolls means it is a school where most of the learning takes place by in the oral tradition. Many things are taught. Ritual worship is also taught. Sanskrit is taught. But these young children who go to these tolls and their schools, toll means at school, informal school. So in Shudiram was one of, I mean, he used to conduct such informal schools because he was a well qualified Brahmin and a Pandit as well, was well versed in the scriptures. So naturally, children used to be sent to him and he used to teach them this oral through the oral tradition. Of course, there was hardly any blackboard learning or writing in books because they did not feel the need for doing so. Moreover, oral tradition in the spoken word is much more powerful than the written word or the, because when you read or write certain things, they are not part of your brain or they may be in your mind, but most of the content remains frozen in the books. You have read it and you know that it is in the book. So you think that I have this knowledge, all I have to do is open the book, or nowadays you open the laptop or computer and Google and find out, oh, this is the knowledge. I have it at my fingertips. But that knowledge is not inside you, it is outside of you. If you lose your book or if you lose the external things where you have recorded these things or where you have read these things, these books, then you are at a loss to understand. I mean, that knowledge is lost. Whereas once you memorize and remember through an oral tradition, that memory, that knowledge which is stored in the memory, you can recollect anytime. That is why in the young age, when the children are growing, they have a wonderful capacity. There's a beautiful book by Mary Sprenger, who was a neuro scientist. She was trying to learn, trying to do some research on many young students or many young children, some of babies, to find out how they learn, what is the best way to make them learn things and retain that knowledge. So she came to the conclusion at the end of the book. She did a lot of studies with thousands of children for a very long time. And she wrote this book, but what the conclusions are amazing. She said the child starts learning because she knew how the neuron activity in the brain takes place, grows as the child grows. When it is in the mother's womb, the whole body does not grow together. Of course, the heart grows slowly, different parts of the body are developed. Everything is not developed at the same time. But she says a deep study of the child growth, even before it is child's growth, before it is born, shows that after a few months, the hearing faculty is already developed before the child is born. So definitely after the child is born, it has an advantage and it can learn faster and better through hearing than reading. The eyesight develops much later in a child. So our ancestors knew that and they gave so much importance to oral tradition that Sri Ramakrishna said, I may not have read books, but do you know how much I heard? And when he heard it, he had a phenomenal memory. He could recite the same thing. He didn't require any paper or some reference to repeat those things. Once he heard it, he was a Shruti Dhara. Dhara means once you hear, you hold it in your memory and you never forget it. So that's why he says, do you know how much I have heard? When the child was growing up, now of course he is very young, and the only source of knowledge is the teaching by his father Kshudiram, who used to keep him on his lap, keep the lively boy. He was very lively, but he used to force him to learn these things, these wonderful things, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and other salutation mantras of different gods and goddesses. So, and later on, when the boy was growing, compared to other boys around him, Shudiram found that this boy, Gadadhar, had a wonderful capacity to remember and reproduce things. And when the boy was asked to repeat these hymns and stories after many days, he could do it without any fault, without faltering. So, Shudiram discovered another important thing in his life. Though he was very keen to learn certain subjects, we see some children have aptitude for certain subjects. He also found that he has tremendous aptitude for learning, for oral learning, especially hymns of gods, goddesses, stories, some making idols from clay, soft clay. He used to go to the potter and immediately pick up all those things. This happened, of course, when he started growing up, but he found that he was indifferent to certain subjects. We'll come to that when he is sent to school, but he noticed it, his father noticed it, that there are certain subjects which he doesn't like. And of course, one of them was mathematics. Even arithmetic he did not like. Because that arithmetic means it is such a wonderful phenomena, Sri Ramakrishna's life, that he never liked calculations. A human mind which is always calculative, always thinks about one's own gain, loss, profit, it cannot be a noble person. Not against all these things. This knowledge is necessary for the creation of wealth, and many people give so much of importance to this analytical ability, mathematics, and all those things. We feel very proud that our children are very good in mathematics. Yes, from a secular point of view, these things are necessary for one's career prospects. But Sri Ramakrishna's mission in life was different. His father found that right from childhood, as it were, he was not exposed to any spiritual, and nobody had told him that the things of the world or the material things are bad for spiritual life, but it was inbuilt into him. His father found that he had an aversion for certain subjects. And he found when he was sent to the primary school, not that he never went to school, he went there to play, used to enact dramas in the Kamarpukur school. And it is a school, it's more like a hut, open, just there is a covering and maybe a grass roof and some poles to hold that roof, that's all. It's an open air school. And the children used to go there, the teachers used to teach mostly oral in an oral way, but sometimes they would use some kind of crude blackboard where multiplication, addition, and all those things were taught. So he discovered that Gadadhar, this young boy, when he was fit enough to go to school, when other boys were learning alphabets, were learning simple arithmetic, addition, subtraction, and all those things, he found that he was very much reluctant to these subjects. So he thought he is perhaps too young and too immature. He doesn't have the maturity. Maybe when he grows up, he will learn. He didn't give up hope, but he felt it's not a very unnatural thing. At least he has interest in some subjects. So he found that he was very fond of play, enacting dramas, and he appeared to be very restless. Just as Swami Vivekananda, when you find in childhood, he had to have two nurses to take care of him. His mother could not handle him. He was so restless. So this kind of restlessness was found in Sri Ramakrishna also. So at the age of 5, there is a ceremony which is performed before the commencement of studies. After 6 months, there is this Annaprasan, where the first rice feeding ceremony, of course, that was done. And rice feeding ceremony is not a simple event in rural Bengal. One has to feed a lot of people, one has to invite a lot of guests, especially a family where he's the teacher. Kshudiram was the teacher for many students, so they expected to be invited. So Kshudiram was a man of very poor means because he was not uh, keen to use his knowledge for earning money. He was a very honest and a very pure Brahmin, and he was not keen to earn money. So naturally, he was afraid that if I could conduct the rice ceremony after 6 months, they feed the child with rice, but then you have to feed all the others who are invited as guests. And a lot of guests would come in the village. So he was hesitant and he was trying to postpone it. Then Dharmadas Laha, who loved the child deeply, who belonged to that village, he said, "Why are you worrying? You conduct in a very grand way. I will pay all the expenses. I will arrange for food." They loved him so much. Just as Sri Krishna, everybody loved him when he was growing up. His friends, the neighbors, everybody was attracted to that wonderful spiritual power of Sri Krishna. Similarly, in Sri Ramakrishna's life also, everybody around him, somehow or the other, helped not only his father. When Sri Ramakrishna grew up, there was another Rasadar, Mathur Babu, who came and supplied all his needs. So we remember the verse of the Gita, Yoga Kshemam Vahamyaham. Ananyas Chintayantoma Ye Janaha Paryupasate Tesham Nityabhiyuktanam Yoga Kshemam Vahamyaham. Krishna says, Ananyas Chintayantoma. Ananya means without any thought of the past, present, and future. Just depending on me. Chintayantoma, one who remembers me, thinks about me, repeats my name. Ye janaha pari upasate, those who worship me in that way, continuously they repeat my name, worship me. Tesham nitya abhiyuktanam. Tesham means to those people who are nitya abhiyukta. Abhiyukta means always connected to me. I am the central person in their life. The Ishta is central in their life. For such people, I take care of their yoga and kshema. Yoga means to acquire by effort. It can mean anything. Yoga here doesn't mean just spiritual knowledge. Yoga means anything which you have to earn through your effort. A living, some material needs, some basic material needs. That is yoga. Kshema means to protect. So I not only help such people to get things, but also I help them to preserve what they have. So they never had any problem. Every time Kshudiram felt that he was running short of money, because he was a noble, truthful man, and he was remembering the Lord always, his Ishta, which was he was so devoted to his family deity, and so much of remembrance he did of Ramchandra, which was the family deity, that Sri Ramchandra came in different forms or different ways through different people. They always helped him. That means he supplied the needs, whatever he needed, and also protected whatever was supplied. Yoga and Shema, Vahamyam. Vahami means I bear. I take the responsibility of these things. So Kshudiram found that whenever he was in a predicament, who will, even during Upanayana we will see later, but this was the rice feeding ceremony, which is known as Annaprasan, Dharmadas La said, you invite all the people whom you know in this village and neighboring villages, and you don't worry about the expenses. I will arrange everything. They loved Gadadhar so much. So, there is another ceremony which is performed before the commencement of studies. Because he was not keen to learn some subjects like arithmetic and other subjects, which would help him to earn a living, he thought that he waited till the age of 5 before he was formally sent into school. They tried to educate him by at least educate him into secular learning. But you see what happens. Actually, he used to go there and was more interested in play than learning this mathematics, arithmetic, and other subjects. Anyway, he had to perform the ceremony for commencement of study. This whole life is full of religious rituals. That is how you reminded yourself of the divinity which is within us, which is without outside. These social customs are not superstitions. They are customs designed that at every stage of life you are reminded. You commence the study, you perform a ritual. You dedicate your studies to God so that you make a beginning by worshipping God. As soon as you end your activity, you worship God. In the midst of your activities, you remember God. So there were these activities, Annaprasan, and then the ceremony before you, the school commencement ceremonies, and all those things were done. And he became a very, very wonderful student, except for his dislike for a few subjects. He was a wonderful student. So Sri Ramakrishna did go to school, but he learned the things which were really necessary for a human being, for what he believed would make him a true human being. He did not believe, in Bengali used to say, I mean, Chal Kola Vidya China. Chal Kola means something that will help him to earn a little rice and banana. I mean, that's the idea. Some basic food for sustaining oneself was known as Chal Kola, to earn. So he said, I don't want that. I'm not interested. Because he knew, as Sri Krishna had promised, that if one is really dedicated to Lord, then it is the Lord's responsibility to take up the yoga and shrema of that person. And he believed his whole life was adherence to truth. The truth of the scriptures were like sacred truth for him. That's why he became Satya Sankalpa. Whatever he thought became true. Because he believed in the scriptures, believed in the truth of the scriptures. He did not doubt like modern man doubts whether I'll be happy if I just totally depend on God. We feel that we have to help ourselves and provide, store, or conserve our money and other things that we earn, save it for future security. But Sri Ramakrishna knew the truth of the scriptures, where the scriptures say, wonderful scriptures like Gita Upanishads, they say, a man who holds on to truth, a man who holds on to God, he will never, he may not be a millionaire or he may not be a very prosperous, materially prosperous man, but his needs will be supplied. That is what Sri Ramakrishna also promised Narendranath. When he was hesitating, he said, don't worry, basic food and clothing will your parents or your mother and other family members will never suffer for food and clothing. But that is the essential, that is the basic minimum that a human being needs. Otherwise, there is no end to what he really wants. So that is why here, his loving nature, Gadadhar's loving nature and his enthusiasm for higher things, for spiritual things, for learning things that will really make him a spiritual person, That endeared him to all the other friends. And he was very popular. You see, the strange thing is, we really appreciate if some people follow the spiritual path, but we ourselves do not want our children to follow it. It's rather strange. You become very popular, but you say, okay, let others' children become spiritual. We will even praise them because we know that is true. But when it comes to your own children, you hesitate. You are a bit selfish. Or if somebody else's child becomes a monk or he becomes a spiritual teacher, God bless him. So that is how the villagers and all the people in Kamarpukur, they loved this child because, but his father or his, though he was a noble person, he was a bit worried that this boy, how will he earn a living? Perhaps he did not have as much faith as Sri Ramakrishna had that the Lord will take care of all. So he was now and then worrying that there are certain these subjects which he doesn't want to learn. What will happen? How will he earn a living? He will have to starve to death. How can he uh, earn money or maintain a family if he doesn't have a fixed income? He didn't know the condition of Sri Ramakrishna's mind. So naturally, you'll find that you'll naturally find that though he was sure of Sri Ramakrishna's divinity or his greatness, because of the he believed in astrology and the astrologer had predicted great things for his son, but still a father's concern will always be there. He was a bit hesitant, or maybe you can say he was a bit worried or anxious about his son. Now, in that school, there was a school, primary school, was known as Laha. Laha, as I told you, Dharmadas Laha, who arranged for Sri Ramakrishna's Annaprasan and other ceremonies. He ran a school. He was a wealthy man, wealthy zamindar, so he had enough money to run free primary school. That's how they did. The village landlords, he was, there used to be, he had a lot of land and there used to be a spacious theatre hall in front of their house. Theatre hall means you perform Durga Puja, like something like Durga Mandap, where uh, public ceremonies, I mean, public worship would take place and a large number of people can attend, even in rain. So it's like a spacious theatre hall in front of their house, the Lahas. They were very rich people. So a teacher was appointed. When it was not used during festivals, it was used, but when it was not used, during other times, it was used as a school, a primary school. And with his own money, there was no government and all those things. In those days, it was the duty of the village people to maintain a school. The rich people used to contribute. So he appointed a teacher to teach these young children, and anybody who wanted to learn, whether they did not have to pay fees, they could just send their children. So Lars established the school. They had established the school to which Sri Ramakrishna was sent at the age of 5. And it was very close to Kshudiram's house. They were almost neighbors. And Sri Ramakrishna used to very often go to their house and they treated him as his own child. So it was open every day in the mornings and afternoons. The biographer says, Swami Shardanji says, the students would arrive in the morning, study for 2-3 hours. That is how the school ran, the primary school. At least this school where Sri Ramakrishna used to go. And they go home, back home, after studying for 2-3 hours in the morning, they go take bath and eat some lunch or something at home. But then they would return at 3 or 4 p.m. and then again it would go for 2 hours. So there were 2 shifts and it was very near. They used to run to their home to bathe and to eat. So young students, the primary students or the very young students like Gadadhar did not have to study so much. It is only the older students. So he says, after finishing their lessons or whatever they studied, whatever was taught to them, mostly it was oral tradition, through the oral method it was taught. So there was not much homework and other things. So this younger children would, as soon as whatever little was being taught to them, they were free, unlike the older children who had to study other subjects. So they would simply go and not go home, but play near the school or go to some mango grove or anything where these smaller children, and very often Gadadhar was their leader, because he was very keen to enact dramas, to repeat what he heard from his father. So his learning was more informal. He would spend more time outside school than in school. So, and another tradition was in those days, the older students sometimes used to teach younger students. Well, they did not have enough teachers. Perhaps one teacher was there for everybody. So the older students were told to teach their younger students or some peers who were weak. And Swami Shardanji says there was only one teacher in the whole school. And still the activities of the school were running very smoothly. He was paid, of course, by the Lahas. So when Gadadhar was first joined, Swami Shardanji is giving the name of the first school teacher. His name was Jadunath Sarkar, not the Jadunath Sarkar who was a great historian, whom Sister Nivedita helped to write Indian history. Not that Jadunath Sarkar, but there was another Jadunath Sarkar who was the first teacher. And then when he retired, there was this Rajendranath Sarkar. So these were the two teachers whose names Swami Shardanji is mentioning here. So after that, we find there were some experiences of Gadadhar which exhibited Sri Ramakrishna's wonderful character. So we all know, we have read earlier, before the birth of Sri Ramakrishna, he had some wonderful visions. That Shudiram had experienced many visions before Gadadhar's birth. In fact, the name Gadadhar was given because he went to Gaya. Vishnu is known as Gadadhar because he holds mace in his hand, Gada in his hand. So Gadadhar, that was the first name. Of course, later on, the name was changed to Ramakrishna, but before that, he was also given according to the planetary position, and they give the names depending on that. So Ga was perhaps, he had to be named, and then he immediately thought of naming him Gadadhar. Anyway, Shudiram had experienced many visions even before the birth of Sri Ramakrishna, of Ram Gadadhar. So those visions had left a permanent impression in his mind. So that was always in his mind when he took certain decisions regarding Sri Ramakrishna's studies, Sri Ramakrishna's future life. He never forgot those. Many times, like any other father, he would have been worried. He was anxious that this boy is not going to school. Even if he goes to school, he doesn't like certain subjects which will help him to build a career, as people now think. So, whenever he saw Gadadhar exhibiting childlike or naughty behavior, even when he grew up, he was now more than 5 years of age, and he still saw that he had that childlikeness, playfulness. He expected a child when he grows, the parents expect him to be a little mature and take his studies seriously. So he would sometimes discipline him by scolding him. Either because, Swami Shardanji says, because the boy enjoyed too much attention from others, or because of his inherent nature, his father observed. This was the thinking. Now Swami Shardanji is analyzing. Why did Shudiram feel upset? Perhaps he felt that this boy, as Yashoda also felt, she was a bit jealous when it came to Sri Krishna, because she wanted Krishna for herself. It's a very natural tendency. If you see your child being loved by others, the mother doesn't like. She wants all the attention, love and attention of which she wants to give to the child reciprocated. The child But Gadadhar was not to be confined within one home. That is a great sign. Today we were discussing the life of Sri Krishna. One of the characteristics of his life was he was loved by everybody, but you should remember he was not attached to anybody. So total detachment was the characteristic of Sri Krishna. That is why the central message of the Gita is anasakti or detachment. He was no doubt detachment was side by side with the attachment he had. His school friends, the gopis in Vrindavan, later on his mother Yashoda, he was attached to them, but now and then he showed very clearly in his life that he was as much detached from everybody as much as he was attached. So nothing could stick to him. Like you see some of the slippery fish, Thakur used to say, some people are like the slippery fish. No matter how much you try to catch that fish, they simply slip out of your hands. They're very slippery. So also Gadadhar, all the avatars, or all the great spiritual people, they are like that. Sri Ramakrishna used to say about Nagmashay and also Swami Vivekananda that Maya could not catch hold of them. They could not bind these people. They slipped out. Of course, the ways they slipped out were different. He used to make fun when he said, Sri Ramakrishna used to say that when Maya is compared to a rope which binds you. He said when the rope was used to bind Nagmasha, he made his ego so small, he slipped out of it. Whereas when Maya tried to bind Naren, he expanded his ego, his self, and made it one with the universal self, that the rope that was used to bind Naren was simply broken. So in either case, whether it was Nagmasha or they had different ways of escaping the net or escaping the rope of Maya. So here also he found that he was not only, he was not restless as modern children are restless. They are restless because their minds are not concentrated. Here he was restless because he was not prepared to be bound by anything in the world. He was born free, he wanted to remain free. The free spirit never left him. In fact, Swami Shardanji writes, he did not like anything if you closed anything. For example, the umbrella, he used to say when the umbrella is open, he liked it. But if somebody tried to close the umbrella, that means you are contracting. Even when arithmetic was taught, he did not like subtraction. Addition was okay for him. But he said division or subtraction never liked. Because that is a negative that binds you, that you get condensed. So when he used to hate if somebody closed an umbrella, because that idea of closing, by some kind of bondage, the idea of bondage, or somebody tied with a rope, he never liked, because he was always valued freedom more than anything else. So naturally, when this boy was free, he could not be restricted. So Kshudiram was, as a natural father would feel, why is he always found in somebody else's house? Some parents, they feel, we love the children so much, they want to be possessive. They want the children always to be with them. They don't like if he loves everybody else. They want the love to be given to them. It's a kind of selfish attachment. The mother says, why there's a child? Why is he so free? He goes to anybody's mother and plays with them as if that lady has not given birth. I have given birth to this child. So those human tendencies you can find in Kshudiram also. So because of his nature, his free nature, he used to sometimes get angry and sometimes try to discipline. So he noticed that this self-willed boy, Gadadhar, sometimes would go with his friends to play outside the village rather than going to school. So he didn't like the closed atmosphere of a classroom. That tendency remained with him always. He used to always love any kind of bondage, whether it is a rope or a closing of an umbrella or restricting oneself within the confines of some room or something. He detested it. That's why he was very often found running away from school. He writes, Swami Shardanji writes that he used to go, many times he was found to play with his friends and attend some open air performance. In most of the dramas, jatras and all those things used to be held. So he would be found there. He enjoyed that. But Shudiram, knowing his divine nature, though he wanted to discipline him, he felt upset, but he did not scold because he saw some kind of inherent greatness. Said, how can I scold? Because his vision which he had in Gaya, Gadadhar's wish that I will be born as your son, that was so deeply imprinted in his mind that who am I to dictate to my son? He is far, he believed that an incarnation was born. Though very often he forgot, he took him to be a normal child and he was worried about his profession, what will he do when he grows up, how will he earn money. Just as Yashoda, she would be very much upset if Sri Krishna did not eat his food on time. So sometimes Sri Krishna would show her his divine form. For a moment, she would understand that who am I? Here is a wonderful, the Lord himself who has come. But immediately, by the power of his Maya, they say in the Bhagavatam, it is that she would forget that he is a divine being. So also Kshudiram's life we find that he very often forgot that many times he would remind himself, oh no, this is Gadadhar himself who has come. So who am I? Let him do what he wants. He is in charge of others' destiny, leave alone his own destiny. He is the one who controls other destinies, being the Lord who controls the destiny of others. So who am I to teach him? So that idea would come and he would refrain from scolding. That's what he says. So whenever Gadadhar wanted anything or began anything, he could not stop. That's another characteristic Kshudiram observed. If he felt that he should do something, nothing in the world would stop him. That is known as Sankalpa Siddhi. We see it in in the Gospel also. It says Master Mashe found that once he decided to do something, you see that these are the lessons which children are to be taught right from childhood. Gadadhar exhibited. This is his divine play. The Leela Prasanga means the Leelas that he played were meant for us, young children, how he was special compared to other children. We are all fickle-minded. We will say we will do this. In between somebody comes, we'll drop that and take up something else. But Gadadhar was exceptional. His Kshudiram, Swami Shardanji writes that Kshudiram found that if Gadadhar began anything, maybe he was just wanted to, till he finished that job, he would not take up another job. Whatever he was doing, if he was playing a drama, then no matter how much you call him, distract him, he will finish it. So Master Mashe also says, Sri Ramakrishna would suddenly say, now I'll go and do pranams to Ma Jagadamba or Bhavatani in the temple. And he would start walking very fast. He used to walk very fast. And then he observed all these things. On the way, several persons would be waiting to meet him or maybe do pranams to him or speak to him, but nothing would distract him. Master Mashe writes in the Gospel, he would straight away go to the temple, first finish the pranams, to pray to the divine, because that sankalpa he had taken After that was over, then he was open to other things if somebody wanted to meet him and all. So, all these things Shudiram found that this is a very, very special characteristics of Gadadhar. So he never dared seeing, because he had idea of his divinity, he never had the courage to stop him. If he expressed that I will go to play or I will go to listen to some drama or perform a drama himself, he used to do acting with his friends. So whenever he said that, Shudiram knew that I should not interfere. He never interfered because he knew that whatever that because Shudiram knew that some children, if you give them freedom, they will harm others or they'll harm themselves. Whereas he knew every action that Sri Ramakrishna did in his childhood, however playful it may be, it never caused harm to anyone. So this is another wonderful quality he noticed. And another quality he noticed is he never tried to conceal his actions by lying. You know, children out of fear, they will tell that, oh, no, I'm going here. They don't want to go to school. They would lie. But Sri Ramakrishna never did that in his life. And Shudiram knew it. He trusted every word, he says. Every word was trusted because he knew whatever that boy may do in playfulness, one thing he will never do, he will never lie. And he will never conceal his actions. And from his behavior or from his activities, he saw that whatever he did, it never caused harm to anyone. So he was, in a way, wanted to discipline this child, but on the other hand, he felt that Sri Ramakrishna, even if he is left alone, he will neither cause harm to anyone, nor will he cause harm to himself. Shudiram at that time did not know exactly what this young boy wanted. But because of his visions, Shardanji says, he was afraid to interfere. So it's a unique relationship between Father Shudiram, because you should all remember that he was born when his father was quite old. He did not have many years to live after that. In those days, it was very common, but he was quite old when, in fact, his elder brother, Ramkumar and Rameshwar, who they used to, they were quite old compared to his age. And as a young lad, they took him, they were all married and also looked after Shudiram's passing away. We'll see that it was the elder brother who was grown enough. He had grown enough to earn a living. Not only that, he was married, plus he could take care of Sri Ramakrishna as his own child, though he was a younger brother. But that is because of the age difference. So anyway, despite all these wonderful qualities, Shudiram this is the last point I'll make and we'll conclude today. He was concerned about one thing in Gadadhar. If for some reason Gadadhar was forbidden to do something, he would not listen unless he was given a valid reason for the same. You see, we should know that this capacity to hold on to truth, if you explain to him why certain things are to be done and why certain things are not to be done, unless you explain him, if you just forbid him, he will never detest from doing it out of fear. Like other children, we will be telling all sorts of cock and bull stories to prevent them. Very often children, just to prevent them from going out, we'll say, don't go out, there is ghost and all those fearful stories, and the poor children will believe in that. And that creates a psychological impact on their minds. Whereas Shudiram found that it never worked for Sri Ramakrishna. If he was told, do not do this, he will not obey unless he is told why you should not do this. You can't just tell this is a custom or this is something. You explain to me and then I will not do it. There should be a valid reason. So, if he was forbidden to do something, he would disobey unless he was given a convincing reason why that instruction was given in the first place. Gadadhar's nature was such, Swami Sardanji says, right from childhood, that compelled Gadadhar to ask questions and inquire about the reason for everything. We should not assume because Gadadhar did not go to school, he did not have a rational mind. That is what Sriram Swamiji says, that we went to the university very often learning second-hand thoughts of other people, but Sri Ramakrishna went to nature and learned his lessons directly. How did he learn? By questioning. Tad vidhi pariprashnena pranipate. First pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. The whole of wisdom, the whole of learning, in fact, according to the Gita, first starts with pranipatena. You bow down before the teacher. Pariprashnena, ask him questions. And then through seva. So that is what Gadadhar would do. He did not mind serving other people. He did not mind being humble in front of everybody. He respected everybody, all his elders. But the second part which Krishna says, pranipatena pariprashnena. Pariprashna means asking valid reasons, not just blindly believing in something because somebody pressurizes you to think. Nobody could pressurize Sri Ramakrishna. So he says, unless he said, unless there was a compelling reason to believe in something, he would not believe. So Khudiram was aware of this nature. So he knew I would never succeed if I force this boy to do something against his wish. Suppose he told him, you should learn mathematics. He will ask, why should I? Then he will say, to earn a living. He said, I don't want to earn a living, because he has to give a valid reason why he should be forced to lead the life of a householder, to be attached. He says, do not the scriptures say that it is bad to be attached to the world? Do not the scriptures extol Tyaga? So his mind was very rational. He said, if you say Mahabharata speaks of the glory of renunciation, Upanishad they say the glory of renunciation, we repeat it parrot-like. And then he would ask his father, like Nachiketa asked his father, do not the scriptures say this? And you are not obeying the scriptures. So these people, I mean, Gadadhar and all these great, if you see their childhood, Swami Sardanji is trying to make a point that they asked questions and they followed something only if they were convinced. Not because somebody says, oh, the whole world follows. Yet let the whole world run after money. You tell me why I should, is this the goal of life? Does not the Shastra say that the goal of life is to realize God? If that is the case, why should I go after this? So now his father had no other answer for this, and he knew it would be impossible to convince Gadadhar to do something in spite of force, in spite of scolding or anything. He would not do it. Simply would not do it. And he could not give a convincing answer. Obviously, if you tell certain spiritual things and recite the Mahabharata, Ramayana, Gita, and as his father did, then you have to act upon it. That is Gadadhar's contention. You speak about the glory of renunciation and you ask me to do quite the opposite, so I'm not going to do it. That is the kind of defiance you find in young Gadadhar's life. He was not somebody, he could not be pushed to do something. You see, this is the characteristic of great prophets. They show by their living example that I may be small, I may be a child. As Nachiketa said, I may be just 14 years, 12 years old. You may be my father or my guru. But you give me a valid answer. Does not the scripture say this? Then why are you doing the opposite? He was not even afraid of Yama. So that is how these wonderful students, this great Sri Krishna or Ramakrishna, you find in the childhood itself. Swami Shardanji analyzes in the childhood itself, we find these great qualities where they could not be dictated by society. Their own father, who were supposed to be their well-wishers, who were their well-wishers, of course. But Sudhiram knew this boy is not going to listen because he wants the truth and truth alone. And I can't give him the truth because people in the heart of their hearts know that we are going against the scriptures when we do certain things, which Nachiketa's father was doing. So he had the courage to criticize his father because he had taken the scriptures seriously. So Sri Ramakrishna also, we'll see now later on, how he broke all the rules, how he took Yagnopavita, I mean the thread, from a low caste woman. Because these are not sanctioned in the scriptures. The many things we will see in his life, he broke the rules if he found that there was no logic, no reasoning to back it up. Just because society does it, I shall not do it. That's his attitude. So, okay, I'll take leave now. So there's one question. Sadhakas may have many questions, but little opportunity to ask them of spiritual teachers. There may be danger of training oneself, isn't it? Or is prayer and japa and study enough? Yes, what you say is true. Many people do not have the opportunity to ask their guru or their teachers. Some, but at the same time, you are asking if one takes decision based on one's own intelligence and understanding, then we'll fall into a trap. Both are true, but at the same time, you have to remember that many things you have to learn indirectly. For everything, you don't have to go to the teacher. The teacher is always gives us some guidelines. And if we have faith in the teacher, then we can develop an attitude. Our mind itself, that is what Thakur used to say, the mind itself becomes your guru. So one has to train oneself in such a way by regularly doing the spiritual practices, as you said, doing sadhana, that develops the mind. Then the mind becomes your guru. The mind always tells you to do the right thing at the right time. So that is the idea. So it is true that every time it may not be possible to ask the teacher, and the teacher would not also like some kind of spoon feeding. Every teacher would want the student to learn things himself. He will encourage the student to learn things himself and not just do the spoon feeding. So both are true. A little bit of obedience and questions are necessary, but at the same time, one has to train oneself. So it is, you see, you have to balance that in one's life. Okay. So I'll take the leave. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. There's one more question. I'll just try to answer this. He says, as a child, he was loved by all. Most children are. But his mother would have also been very unique in the sense of being comfortable with that. Otherwise, mothers can be possessive. Yes, we will come to that. Now, we are discussing primarily Shudiram's attitude because we have not come to that topic. Yes, mothers will be more possessive than fathers. We'll come to that. We'll come to Chandramani Devi's attitude. She had just begun this childhood days. These are very important days because that teaches parents how to look after their children or how to train them. Sri Ramakrishna's Balya Leela is as important as his Sadhaka Leela or his Guru Leela. Many things he did. 5 parts of his life, Sharadananda is divided. People think we'll just skip the Balya Leela. After all, he was very small. What can we learn from these small children? We may not be able to learn, but because we have grown up now, but we can learn how to encourage children to learn the way Sri Ramakrishna learned. So yes, mother's training will come, definitely it will come. Chandramani Devis, we'll discuss it when the topic comes. Now we just discussed what Shudiram felt and what Shudiram did, what Shudiram understood as a father, what he understood, whatever his anxieties, whatever his worries, and how he solved them.